just here for each other's company. We're here because we want to change the direction of our communities and our nation, and as great as our state is, we want to make it even better. So we do a lot of work coming together and deciding what we believe and what we want to see happen. And so the legislative priorities that have come out of the last convention cycle, I had a lot of work to make that happen. The SREC now has a Legislative Affairs Committee. It's a standing committee that I helped put together. I'm a member of. The good news is apparently I'm making some friends in the SREC pushing all those things forward. I'm also a member of the Officials Committee, which Mary will talk about in a few minutes. They are the elected executive committee of the SREC. There's 8 of us. There's 5 of us elected, 3 appointed, and I'm one of those elected members. We meet periodically and handle the business of the party between SREC meetings. So we're the executive board of the board. So that's a bit about me. James asked me to come and talk about some recent controversy that the SREC has had going on. I really appreciate the question. We don't necessarily get asked this a lot because it's some weedy stuff. So bear with me here. I'll try to just touch on the highlights here to get to the bottom line. Kind of started with back with a special meeting of the SREC. SREC meets quarterly, and our first regular meeting is the quarter after the state convention, but we had an early meeting this last session to go along with some training for new county chairs, and it was suggested that we should go ahead and start our business there and ratify our committee appointments, which normally is a pretty standard kind of thing to do. The issue that we ran into is when those committee appointments came out, a lot of people were very surprised by them. We weren't expecting to see the appointments we saw. We weren't expecting to see the committee structures and compositions and sizes and things like that change as dramatically as they had. And I don't need to belabor that. The bottom line is that the SRC wasn't real happy with it and ultimately voted to not ratify those appointments and push them down to the next regular meeting when we normally ratify them. This is worth mentioning largely because of what it said. It said the SREC, the chairman of any committee, the chairman of any club, usually enjoys quite a lot of latitude in what they want to do or how they want to appoint things. In any environment, the body saying even we want to postpone ratifying these appointments says there's a little bit of tension, right? The chairman of the RPT usually enjoys like a 40 to 20 vote marked majority for basically anything that he wants to do or he or she wants to do. And that kind of said that wasn't the case in this SREC, that we were going to ask a lot more questions and care a lot more about what the outcomes were that were suggested at us. So that was kind of what set the stage, but moving on from there, the stuff that's gotten real heavy since then focuses almost entirely on this weedy question of how did the SREC amend our bylaws? You're a club, you're all politically involved, you're familiar with the notion of bylaws and rules. But historically, the SREC, like any organization, we have our bylaws that are, the things that set how we do our business meeting to meeting and establish all of our committees and such. And historically, it has a pretty standard threshold of 2/3 of those voting to change any of those things. So if you have everybody in SREC meeting, 64 people, and most of them participate in a vote, that's roughly a 40 to 20 split to get anything changed. The SREC's had a little bit of a weirdness there over the years in that we are not like other organizations. Tarrant County, for example, every 2 years we have an organizational meeting of the precinct chairs. And y'all that are precinct chairs, those meetings can last 4 hours. They can last all day. They have in the past been known to last 6 months. Not continuous, but they can take a long, long time because you're talking about rules and bylaws and things you want to change. The SREC's organizational meeting usually lasts about 4 minutes. And that's not hyperbole. You can time it with a stopwatch because it happens at the end of the state convention. And any of y'all that have been delegates, when you get to the end of the last day of the state convention, do you want to go to an organizational meeting of the SREC? Very few people want to go have a 4-hour meeting. So we go in there and we say, here's the bylaws from last time, let's just approve them and go home, and that's what happens. And then the problem you have is you have new members that aren't familiar. You have people that want to change things that they could do with the new body, but you wait 3 months, 6 months, and you kind of get stratified. So your rules committee of the last convention has been looking at this issue for about 12 years now and decided to take an approach this time that would just change that threshold. I know this is weedy, and I apologize, but it's what you need to understand to get to the point of the issue. To just change that threshold so that always 33 members, 64 members of the SREC, half of all of those plus one would be able to make a change as a way to try to address this 4-minute organizational meeting issue. And so the Rules Committee of the convention recommended that change, the convention put it through, and then the SREC at our organizational meeting, that was like this one of two amendments we went ahead and adopted was, let's comply with that convention change because we have to. So that's what we have going into this. Next slide. So coming into the first regular meeting of the SREC then, what we saw was a proposal being made to change the SREC amendment threshold back to that 2/3 all the time. Which the first question is you can't do that. State convention rules say we can't. It has to be this other threshold. And so the chairman issued a ruling that said it was allowable, and his argument was fundamentally that the convention didn't know what they were doing. That no matter what was written in the rule book, and if you go ahead and skip a couple slides, one more. The bold text in there is what was put in front of the delegates at the convention to add. Basically, his argument was that the committee chair giving the report didn't talk about all of those things, and we talked about some of them. That the heading of the section they're under says supplementary rules - meetings, so it only can apply to talk of the organizational meeting. There were, and one of his fundamental arguments for why it was okay to change it was that the convention shouldn't have done it, that it was a bad idea. Go back a couple. And so he made this ruling, which a lot of people, including myself, didn't agree with. And the thing is, when the chair issues a ruling like that on our rules, the SREC is the one that actually decides if it passes or not, if we accept his ruling or not. It's not like a courtroom where the judge rules and it's the final word. It's a deliberative body. The chairman gives a ruling, and the body says we agree or we don't agree. So I made a motion to basically flip his ruling. And say that it said what we argued it always intended it to say. One of these slides in here is a letter that we presented from the Rules Committee of the State Convention where well over half the members signed it and said we knew what we said what we meant what we said. We wanted to make this change, whether some people think it's a good idea or not. Please don't overturn the convention. So I made that motion, and then here's where we get into the question of votes that people have heard about. The first vote that mattered here was on my amendment, and the vote came down 31-30 in favor of my amendment. Well, the chairman, of course, can vote to break or create a tie when it changes the outcome, and in that case it did. So the chairman cast his first. It's rare that the chairman needs to cast a vote. It's rare that you have a tie, and just like it's rare for him not to get his appointments. But here we had what we thought might be an anomaly. The chair went ahead and voted, created a tie, so the amendment was defeated. Well, then we go back to his original ruling that still has to get voted on, and we go and vote on that, and somebody didn't vote and somebody else flipped, or however it went down. That vote was, as I recall, 30-30. It was a tie, which means it doesn't pass. So it's also a case where the chair can vote, and he did vote. So we had two back-to-back. He voted to break the tie and adopt his ruling that this be set aside, or had a different meaning from what some of us were saying, and that the SREC can move forward. So next slide, coming up on the end here. Once that ruling was adopted, it was now in order to look at the proposal to make it, that bylaws amendment threshold, go back to 2/3. And we have the third vote, which comes down, and this was at the next meeting because we'd run out of time that day, so 3 months later we came back for round 3. That one came down 31-30 in favor of the change. However, going back to what I said there, it's majority membership. It's always 33 votes. If you have 20 people leave and there's 40 in the room, and you 39-1, you still, or sorry, 30-10, you don't have your majority you need. So it was 31-30, and it didn't pass. Except that about 30 seconds later, a gentleman walked in, because 31-30 is not 64, right? There were a couple absent, a couple in the hall. A gentleman walked back in, and they said, "How do you want to vote?" And he said, "What are we voting on?" And they told him, and he voted with the 31 crowd, and he objected because we didn't really feel that was in order, but it went forward. And once we were at 32-30, once again, we're at that one vote margin where the chairman can make a difference, and so he went 3 for 3. and voted to adopt that change. And now the proposal, it passes 33-30, and the threshold goes back to 2/3. So that's what happened in a brief form. Questions I'm sure people have on why it matters and et cetera. But the essence of the issue that people were asking about is why is the chairman voting, why is he breaking ties, and why is there something that's this contentious? There definitely were some bylaws proposals that have been moving forward that people had a lot of questions on. One of them that was probably the most instrumental in creating this situation was, what are we going to do with the legislative priorities the convention gave us? The convention gave us 5 ledge priorities. The SREC adopted 3 more under direction of the convention. And what do we do with those during the legislative session? And there's been a lot of discussion in the SREC about the most appropriate way to do that. I mentioned there's a legislative affairs committee that I'm a member of. We're doing training. I'm doing a training tomorrow night, by the way. If you know the Texas legislature online's out there, but you don't know that you can go look at the text of any bill or track it through the process or view video of the session as it's happening, I'm going to be going over all of that tomorrow online. You can look at texasgop.org, click the link for the 85th legislature, and you'll have the link to that there, or look on the party Facebook page. We're doing that kind of thing. We are sending out a weekly update and text alerts on when bills are in session, but the big contentious question was, who gets to go talk in front of the legislature, like if a constitutional carry or an abolition of abortion or an elimination of the property tax or a constitutional convention or border security or sanctuary cities bill or a religious liberty bill. We have 8 different ones. If those bills come forward for hearings, who gets to go talk? We were having this big argument in the SRC about whether or not it should only be the chairman that goes and talks on behalf of the party, or if members of the SREC should be able to go have those conversations and testimonies. So that's a little bit of context. There's coming up on time here. Hit the slides quick and we'll see. I don't want to touch any more of them. This is the letter I referenced. You don't need to read it. I didn't try to make it big enough to read. Just put it on a slide. You can see, go back. You can see it's got a lot of signatures. It's almost the entire committee, including a lot of people who didn't vote for that change. They still supported us making it, or supported it standing. Go ahead. Yeah, we already looked at that. Go ahead. And yeah, these last 2, just go back and look at party rules. I included these 2 because the argument that the heading of the rules matters and that he could rule that it wasn't what it said because the heading said it's about meetings. If you go look at RPT Rule 8 that talks about meetings, you'll find multiple examples of things in there that have absolutely nothing to do with meetings, including, this one is the county chair keeps a list of precinct chairs and publishes it when they change. It's nothing to do with meetings of the ACs. The next one is another one this convention added that was added to deal with the concerns raised by the Travis County chair election. It talks about how a county party can complain to the SREC about their county chair and ask for something to be done. Again, has nothing to do with meetings, but I don't need to go into that. So that's some context and some explanation of that happened. I don't know that I've got time to get questions now, but I'm happy to stick around after I'm talking. I'm going to give Mary a little bit of time to put the horse after the cart and tell you all what the SREC is. We talked about some of what we do. Thanks.
Okay, Jeremy's just done.
Y'all can see me.